Hello everyone, this is Master Viktor Neustroev. We are about to start our workshop today. Today our topic is tension in the center, so when to relieve it, when to release it, when to keep it. So we have a lot of participants today. And actually our workshop today will be shorter than usual because I'm still playing in the tournament and I need time to prepare. My round starts in 4 hours. So we're going to do a workshop, then I have some individual class, one individual class more, and then I have to quickly prepare for my next game. Today is the last round, round number 9. At the moment I have only 5.5 of 8, which is not such a great result. So I'm planning to do my best and to win the last game, but who knows how it happens. What can I say? That these people, even if they are 1800, they play really strong. I don't know why. So this time, today I'm playing with white pieces. But I realized that, well, for example, yesterday I won a game against National Master. His rating is 2000, but he was 2200, and this is how he obtained his National Master title. And he was doing really well. So he was playing the moves I expected him to play because I consider them to be the best. He almost played with no mistakes. I don't know why is it, how is it possible? I'm almost 2300, he's 2000. Why he plays just approximately similar like I play? What happens with this rating deflation? I don't understand. Okay, fine. So is everything working? My sound and video quality should be good, as well as I can see that you see the screen. Okay, perfect. Is there anybody who joins our workshop for the first time? If yes, please just introduce yourself. Tell me which country you are from and what's your rating. It can be either FIDE, USCF, or just chess.com, or even Lichess rating. Okay, so what are we going to work today? Today we are going to talk about probably one of the most important thing in the chess game at the center, and this tension in the center, because it's very often a serious problem whether when to trade in the center, when not. So when we have pawns in the center that are mutually attacking each other or are ready to attack each other, we say that there is a tension. What can be done in such a situation? For example, well, both players can support this tension with pawns or even with pieces by bringing the rooks to the files that are likely to be open. Or there can be exchanges initiated. Why not? Or they can just advance pawns further if there is such a possibility, like it is in this position when we can play f5. When it is favorable to support tension. For example, when we are preparing our pieces for a better moment to relieve or release this tension. Or, for example, when we are waiting for a better moment to advance, then it does make sense to keep this tension. So, well, this is what usually chess players do. They try to keep tension, prepare their pieces, and then release it. That's the goal. Well, what else can we do? Instead of just preparing our pieces, we can tie enemy pieces to these pawns in the center. And instead we can focus on something else, or occasionally advance our pawn, so there is no more tension in the center, but the enemy pieces are not well placed, and we can initiate the attack on the king side. when do we have to trade? When do we have to release this tension in the center? Well, for example, if we have mass exchanges and then pass the game to a favorable endgame. So actually, if speaking about my winning games, so all of them except the first one were decided in the endgame. All my winning games except the first one were decided in the endgame. Why so? Well, I cannot say, but I think that the reason is that these guys are too strong to make mistakes in middle games, and I have to outplay them. So when I passed the game to the end game, it wasn't obligatory winning; it was just slightly better. And then I had to show some end game technique. By the way, so we are doing a course of group lessons on Fridays, which is called Improve Your End Game Technique. So it seems that I've already improved it, so it's your turn. We did 2 lessons and skipped the one this past Friday because of my tournament, and we are going to continue next Friday. So what else? So when we pass the game to a favorable end game or initiating some favorable trades, then we can relieve this tension. When, for example, an opponent starts a flank attack, we should open the position in the center. Then definitely it does make sense to trade in the center. When by trading we activate our pieces and have some initiative. Or, for example, if we stop the enemy pawn storm. Well, advancing pawns instead of keeping tension is favorable when we are trying to grab more space, when we see that these exchanges are unfavorable, for example, because our opponent can initiate due to exchanges, he can activate his pieces. Let's start from the first game. Actually, this is not the first one. This is game number 3. This is the first one that I'm going to talk about. Looks like there is a central tension and white has a difficult strategic choice. So it's Ruy Lopez, right? With a common plan of doing c5. Black wants to increase tension by bringing the rook. Now, releasing it will leave the queen on the same file as the rook, which can be quite unfavorable. That's why white decides to not trade, but continues with his slow plan. So for Ruy Lopez, I'm sure you know that this is the most common plan. Sometimes it's combined with g4, especially if the bishop went to g4 and is on h5, then doing g4 and then knight g3 and knight f5 is a very common strategy. Well, what do you think black should do? Well, this move, then where the knight goes, and what this move is actually doing. So e4 is well protected. They will just continue with knight g3. So what are your suggestions for this position? B pawn. You mean advance the B pawn? It does make sense. I agree with you. However, it usually happens when the center is stable. In this exact position, I don't think b4 is a mistake. I think you can play such a move, but how does it relate to the center? Because of course they won't take. Actually, even if they take, what then? Knight c4, preparing your pieces. Well, probably. I would maybe play something like h6. Yeah, I like knight c4. I mean, not h6, maybe g6, because f5 is crucial. Well, bishop b7, I'm not sure what the bishop does, because f5 is important, and you either play g6 or you keep your bishop to be ready to capture on f5 if needed. That's why, well, black decided to... how about e takes d4? What's the purpose of e takes d4? Oh, e takes d4, actually, I'm not a big fan of it. Because you allow your opponent to get the center, and if now you take, then this pawn is a backward pawn. Rook b8 and b4. Okay, another plan, rook b8 and b4. But yeah, I like knight c4 move. I like g6, just some preparation. to maintain this tension in the center. But black decided to solve this situation drastically. White can easily move the rook there on c1. Yes, so actually I'm not going to open the c file, and black here plays d5. Well, it's not a super move, but the logic is obvious. They are trying to take advantage of this rook versus queen confrontation. But now white has to make a tough choice. Which pawn to take? Because not taking the pawn is likely to lose, because e takes, c takes, d takes, then d4 is vulnerable, there will be a pin. So it's definitely unfavorable for white if they just keep it. Maybe they can prepare, or maybe they should initiate a trade, but which pawn to start with? Yeah, black is trying to open the d file, that's absolutely right. Okay, so while you're thinking, there are two new students, Graham from the United States, who is 1600 USCF rating, and Jezreel with FIDE rating 1453. Which country? It's not written, but fine. So yeah, if you don't know who I am, I'm a FIDE master. I live in Argentina. So originally I'm from Russia, but nowadays for 2 years I've been living in Argentina. My current rating is 2283, but I'm going to drop it a little as a result of this current tournament. Okay, so Brian suggests to play knight e5. It's interesting. Let's take a look at this move. I didn't analyze it, but it seems logical. So, and then what? They have now decide which. Yeah, I like c takes d4. I like c takes d4. C takes d4 is a must. I don't think this is a good move, because then rook d5. So c takes d4, d takes e4. And then if you take with a bishop, you lose your bishop. I mean, it's a trade. And let's say this. The rook has to move. And where? If the rook moves somewhere there, it's just queen e5 simply. So the rook has to go back to the back rank or to protect the queen. And I'm sure this time you have a significant advantage in this position. So let's decide which move to start with. My intention is to either play bishop f6 or knight c6. I didn't decide yet. Can I just play queen b6 maybe? Okay, knight c6. If you take, I take with the queen, you are likely to lose this pawn anyway, because I'm going to add more pressure on it. And also black is given a bishop pair, so knight e5 is playable, but probably not the best way. Yeah, bishop b4 to chase that rook that just moved back. That's right, that also makes sense. What else? E takes d5. Yes, but if e takes d5, it's e takes d4, and then you don't take on e5. So the best option actually was capture with this move. Okay, let's go back to this moment. So this bishop b7, rook e1. I play knight e6. So the idea is to play bishop f4. Well, d4 is now hanging. I think I can just take it with a rook and threaten this, because this allows me to play queen c6, threatening mate and threatening the queen. White does lose. Yeah, white has to play queen g4 maybe to defend, but then it's rook f4. So maybe queen f3 instead. Then it can be queen takes, pawn takes, rook e7, bishop f3, and black should be winning. They are pawn up in this endgame. So it's hard, but it should be winning, especially with such a bishop versus knight. So bishop f4 doesn't work here because d4 was hanging. So instead, they should capture on e5 with the pawn. It looks really bad because the d file is open with a tempo. But look at this position. The knight is under attack too, and e5 pawn is protected. What you need here, not this, saving this knight, but because of queen e5 and the black is fine, the e4 pawn cannot be captured. Maybe there is a pressure with knight g3 and so on. And finally, you will be able to take it. But then what? Black seems to be completely fine here. I would say maybe black is very slightly better, like minus 0.2. You can play bishop d2 or knight 1 to d2. For example, knight 1 to d2, he takes, but you take. And then after queen f3, looks like white pieces are activated. Why did Isaac Boleslavsky didn't play this exact line? Because he saw bishop b7 here, but bishop b7 is a mistake. I think he just didn't calculate the line to the very end. He thought, okay, so with bishop b7, it seems I lose initiative. What do you think? How white should respond on bishop b7? Yes, it's queen f5, exactly. So queen f5 threatens mate, it leads to checkmate because the king cannot escape. And the only way to stop the queen coming to h7 is g6, which means that the bishop is hanging on f6. So that's why with queen f3, white converted, I mean, white released all this tension in the center, but activated his pieces. Now there is a threat of knight e4, knight f6. There is a threat of queen f5 if the bishop moves. Queen f4 currently is a threat. I don't know if it's serious because g6 can be just played. But definitely white pieces are better prepared to the open center. Another feature is to block with a bishop, which was also fine. For example, take. Here you have to calculate f takes g2. Because in this position, you are completely fine. It's almost the same, but this time there is a bishop. You have to play rook d1, and then you can play knight g3, knight f5, or maybe knight e4. So it's also fine. But then additionally, you have to calculate this line. So you take on e7 with a tempo, but they take here. Queen f1, queen moves. And this should be fine too, because it's not so easy to get rid of this pawn. If you take with a queen, it's rook e8 with checkmate. If you take with a pawn, then the whole king side is exposed. Is d5 so good? Well, I cannot say it's very good because there was a possibility for white to obtain advantage. They should release this tension with d takes e5 move. And due to that, their piece's activity would be a more dominating factor than the activity of the black rook on the d file, for example. However, they took on d5 because they didn't want the d file to be opened quickly. So knight takes, e takes d4, c takes d4, and knight takes d5. And this is where they are in a trouble. It's not a losing position, but they experience serious issues. So queen e2 was played. Well, if bishop f6, it's queen e8, for example. Bishop b7 just. Knight goes to g3, c takes d4, knight takes d4, and this position is approximately equal. Both players have active pieces. Well, f5 should be covered, that's why g6 is played. And white could have some promising chances here. What do you suggest for white in this position? A kingside attack. So they play bishop h6 in the game. Bishop 4. So bishop e4, bishop f6. What's the purpose of bishop e4? Bishop d2, rook c1. Well, bishop d2, knight c4 already can be played. Rook c1. Well, just let's move the queen away. Seems to be too slow. So white can fight for some advantage only, but only in case if they calculate this sacrifice. This, not even that sacrifice. Yeah, knight d5 works. Knight g5 doesn't. So let me explain why. Okay, let me explain how this works first. Knight f5. So yeah, there is an attack, and most likely white has to capture it. It's not obligatory, but looks like without that, it's very hard to defend the king side. So take, knight takes, and bishop moves to b4. If, let's say, the bishop moves to f6 instead in this position, there is knight h6, and after king g7, because this knight is still on g3, so we went to f5 with the d knight, now we can play knight h5. And once they take after queen e4, it's a disaster. So rook h8, but knight f5, and then it's a back rank mate. In case of king f8, we include bishop h6, and then deliver a back rank mate. Can black just move king h8? Yes, they can. But, well, then f7 is weak. So king h8 in this position, you mean? I think knight h5 can be played anyway. So g takes h5 and queen e4. And this time you cannot play rook h8. So that's why after knight h5 you cannot accept it, but then you have to move the bishop. But where? And what if they activate their bishop? But not this way, but where do you move the bishop? It's a bit of a problem. So that's why instead of bishop f6, the bishop should go to f8. However, well, if you played with this knight, then bishop f6, knight h6, king g7, they are fine. So it's still possible to play this, but then what? Knight takes, king goes to h8 successfully. So probably queen h5 in this position to attack there. No. You cannot play like that. Queen c2. Okay, fine. So let's go back. G6 and knight df5 was the best move. So take, bishop f8 is better than bishop f6. What would you continue for white in this position? So they are a piece down. Actually, let me flip the board for you. Maybe you'll find it better if I flip it. So bishop h6 looks interesting. But, well, bishop h6 deserves attention, but what then? They may not take. Queen g4 looks good too, but king h8, and how to continue? You also hang your bishop on c2 after that. This is why you have to somehow solve this problem after king h8. So bishop h6 and then queen g4. Well, there is knight h6 also. Let's talk about this move. So, for example, bishop h6, how to play? No, okay, let me just take, and king h8. Then how do you win? There is no dark squared bishop. And I'm going to play f6, and I'm still a piece up. If you start with knight h6, then it's king h8 directly. Queen g4 first, king h8, and then bishop h6, bishop takes, queen g4 first, king h8, and then knight h6, and then I play f6, so the queen on g7 cements the position. Well, you can try knight f5 and stop it, but then rook g8. So Peter suggests a very nice idea. No, there is a knight in the center. So Peter suggests right. Okay, let's continue. So this, no, bishop h6, bishop takes bishop, intermediate check. He goes that way. This f6. Well, rook e7. What about queen e7? Because if I take with my knight, it's knight f7 mate. This is what I see. Okay, so Peter suggests a good idea of doing bishop g2 and bishop c3. However, obviously this idea fails. Why? Because they can take there, because they can take on c2. Yes, but activating the bishop on this diagonal is what we really need for this position. And because of that, b4, gaining a temper, white is able to play bishop b2. So, for example, let's say this stupid move. Queen g4, king h8, and bishop b2, it's game over. f6, you take, and that's it. They have to block, but you take it. So this is a stupid move, obviously. But what else they can play? Let's say queen c3, which allows you to capture on a5, and if, yeah, knight c4 too. And if this, then bishop e3. Discover the attack. And then this bishop goes to d4. First, let's do a check. And then in the bishop d4, bishop d4 this time doesn't work so well. Let's just play bishop g5. And then there is knight h6 and bishop g6. If the queen goes there, it's knight h6, bishop g6. I think it's enough material. So this, take, then take. Then what should I take? On g5 or h7? Maybe on h7. And then I have a plan of a rook lift. I'm not sure if I can succeed with it, but no, technically it's materially equal. But with such a king, I don't think black survives. Well, if the queen goes somewhere else, there should be a checkmate. Always this move at least. Maybe with bishop h6. Okay, fine. So queen c3 strategy doesn't work. What about knight c4? Looks like this move brings the knight to the game and allows it covers b2. So then what do you think we can do? Well, it looks like it's a helpful move. The knight gets closer to the place of action and covers b2. But what this move is missing? It does do something wrong for the black's position. Yeah, because this time the bishop on c2 is no longer hanging. That's why queen h5 is a possibility with a mating threat of knight e7 and queen h7. And that's losing. So knight f6, let's say, queen g5, king h8, I take this. Okay, how should I play? Can I play bishop h6 in this position? Oh, no, let's just play knight h6. So if bishop takes, there is a checkmate on g7. If no, the king doesn't move. Okay, sorry. Okay, so knight c4 fails. b4 and the position becomes winning. And this is how white could play for a win. Well, black could not accept it and continue with this move, but then it's a complicated position. So, well, not king g8, maybe just king h8 in this position, like that. And then maybe not accepting it with bishop g7 or something like that. So it was still possible for black to keep playing. Now let's flip the board again. Instead, bishop h6 looks like a logical and helpful move, but at the same time, this is already a serious mistake, and now it's too passive. Now black takes initiative and gets the center control. Knight b3, knight c4. So the king is safe, and black dominates in the center. Knight e4, well, I don't know if it did make sense to defend, because there are two pieces attacking it. So knight e4, bishop b2, knight c5, trying to pressure there, but just bishop a1. So he sacrificed the exchange, hoping to weaken main diagonal and take advantage of it by playing knight f6 or somehow bringing the queen there. But f5 and g7 is well covered. Knight b7, queen b7. So there is no compensation for the material sacrificed. What white can do is only hope for a mistake. Knight d3, knight c3. And after queen f6, I don't think the game deserves analysis anymore. Looks like white has a domination. So what did happen in this scenario? Yeah, let me just show you the last few moves. So there is a checkmate. Oh, actually nice mate here in the very end. Knight f3. So if the king moves, there is a checkmate with knight f2 or knight g3. But if they take, which is their only move, it's queen e2. King goes there. And then you play this move and then knight g3. So the king can go to h1 immediately. If so, you have to take with on f3 with a check, forcing the king to go to h2 or g1, and then you can deliver another check on f2, and only then you continue with knight g3. So what did happen in the game? There was a tension in the center in the very beginning. So here, and because black thought that their pieces are better prepared for to open the position in the center, they decided to offer this trade, and that wasn't the best way to play. So this release of the tension in the center could lead to the white's advantage in case if they realized that in this exact position bishop b7 is not playable and white has initiative. The knight goes to e4 with a temper, the bishop goes somewhere, c5 is an object of the attack. They just realized that after bishop b7 the queen moves and black has initiative. They can replace their rooks to the open file and because of that obtain a better position. Can we find a better black move? Why? Well, yes, I think it's knight c4. Why not? Maybe c takes d4, c takes d4, and then knight c4. Just preparing your pieces for a better moment to release this tension in the center. Well, okay, let me just go back, but you make c3 a weakness. Just let's say knight b6. Then I can use the c file. Yeah, well, it's playable. It's approximately equal. Okay, let's continue with our second example. Looks like at the moment there is no tension, but it's about to appear in case if black decides to play c5 or white plays e4 somehow. Black pieces are about to invade the enemy camp. But these pawns create a mechanical barrier. So what would you suggest? Because if you suggest playing c5, it looks quite suspicious because takes and then bishop g5. So d5 is vulnerable. And if you play d4, it can be knight d5, by the way. So you're likely to face with serious problems. It will be hanging pawns that we analyzed at the last class, but then just this, and you have to defend them. And doing this means this. Or even they can play bishop g5 without this trade and threatening to take on d5 and add pressure. So it's very hard to continue. Bishop e6, let's say, then even e4. And, well, you see, there is a direct confrontation. And even if you take, they can try d takes c5 or even capturing on e4 and adding more pressure there. So that's why you have to get prepared for that. And because of that, the most common move in such positions is knight e4. So you are threatening the knight. They don't want to lose a tempo defending it. That's why they offer a trade. What do you think black had in mind? So bishop or pawn? Bishop to not close the bishop. Okay, bishop. Well, I don't know if there can be f3. What do you think? So bishop takes f3. Bishop f5. And they wonder if they can play e4. So takes, check, king h8. Maybe it's fine. d2 with the temper. Okay, so bishop takes. I think it's a possible move. Then maybe bishop f4 first. Well, okay, and then maybe e3 just. So f3 was a wrong strategy. Yeah, taking with the bishop is not a mistake. Okay, let's go back to the original position. Knight e4 was played in the game, but let me comment what Peter wrote. Black has a better position, maybe because the dark squared bishop doesn't have a great square. Ah, this bishop doesn't have a great square. No, this bishop actually has two great squares. The knight on c3 doesn't have a good position, right? The e4 is difficult. Well, what can I say about this position? Black adds pressure on d4 with this bishop. And this bishop is about to come to g5. So knight e4 is logical. But instead of capturing with the bishop, you'd better capture with a pawn. It's a slightly better move. Why? Because, well, you add pressure on d4 with your bishop, with your queen. I'm not sure if you should take with the bishop immediately, but look at rook d7, which helps you to not only support d4, once you take it with a bishop, but also to get rid of the pin quickly. Plus, by capturing with a pawn, you bring this pawn closer to the attack. So h4 is a threat now. That's why white plays h4, but rook goes there, attacking here. Bishop g5. So black didn't want to move their queen. They played bishop f6. It led to a bishop trade, and now this pawn has to be protected. So let's say they try e5. What would you do in this position? It's likely to be a stable center or a close center. I would say stable. It's not so close, but it's stable. So rook d5 and rook a5 in order to attack the queen. Well, you lose on a7. Bishop g4. Then bishop f3 probably, right? This is the plan. Rook e d8 and c5. Interesting. Yeah, I think rook e d8, they have to bring the rook away, and now c5 cannot be played. Well, you may have some ideas of doing rook d2, but it seems to be not so effective. So when the position is closed, or the center is stable, what can we do? At least we have a right to do it. Attack on the king side. Yeah, so this is a precondition of the king side attack. That's right. That's why g5, obviously g5. So they cannot support h4. So queen, pawn takes, queen takes, and then h4, and then rook e6, rook g6, or even f6, and the rook goes to g7 or h7. It looks like a promising attack then. That's the reason why e3 wasn't played. Instead, they played queen c4. Rook e d8, adding more pressure. Well, e3 this time is a mistake because of c5, and there is a rook hanging on the back rank. And if d5, it's queen e5, the pawn is lost. So rook c1, they want to trade like that. However, rook d6, queen c3, and finally this capture was played. It led to a trade, so this exchange is secured, but white, of course, avoids a kingside attack. It won't be checkmated. However, this endgame is very difficult to play because of this bishop passivity. It's blocked by the pawn. Well, this bishop is not super good, but it's always possible to play bishop e6. I actually like playing such positions when I can stop the bishop activity on g2 with e4 or d5 pawns. So rook d2, a4. Rook b2, yes. You suggested rook e7, rook c1. When? Mm-hmm. Well, you lose. Well, it's actually white to move. Maybe one move here. No, here. No, actually, when? Oh, e3. It was e3 and g5. But this is what you mean. This is what you can play. No, there is no skewer. So, well, rook c1. What's the point? Rook c1, rook d5. But I don't even understand. Well, let's say you play this move. What did you achieve? Queen e2 just. Yeah, but isn't it better undermining it originally and win a pawn just for free? Because rook d5 is a several tempi maneuver which allows them to parry your threat in one move. But actually, let's see. Maybe there is a better move for white. No, I actually don't see it. Well, there is a check right away. How do you parry it? King g7. Then rook d5 is a threat. Maybe rook c1 in this position. There is rook d4 then. But rook d4, queen c6. So it looks like it's the same endgame. Well, yeah, maybe I shouldn't play queen c8. But rook e7 seems to be quite slow. I would better prefer the strategy of doing g5. It's like a one-way road. Black attacks while white cannot have any counterplay. So the trade happened, and then he lost the pawn on b3. So finally he lost it because he couldn't defend it. If he moved this rook, he would lose on e2, and then f2 will be vulnerable. And well, this endgame is losing. Rook b2, bishop f1. This is where he resigned. Here is a pawn down, but it's an easy win. I mean, it's an easy win for black, even with just only one pawn. How you can play in this position? Well, you should win this pawn. I think it's possible. Let's say rook a2, and then I want to play e3 and bishop here. Yes, let's start with this move because I want the c rook to get tied down to the pawn on e4, so I don't want to defend my a7 pawn. So, but king g7, king f6, king f5 seems like a plan. Well, anyway, well, for grandmasters, it's obvious. That's why after bishop f1, well, he played such a move and then resigned. Fine. So what did happen in this game? Instead of doing c5, which seems a logical plan in such a position, black decides that open the center right away doesn't favor them and play knight e4 to be able to block the bishop, focus on the kingside attack, and occasionally increase pressure on the pawn on d4 and then undermine it. They couldn't win a pawn, but activated the rooks in the endgame, so bringing the rook to the second rank, which creates a weakness there. And because of that, the game was won. Let's continue. This is probably our last example. Then I'm going to start preparing for my game today. By the way, just a reminder, so these workshops happen every week, every Sunday. Well, sometimes I'm on vacation, sometimes I'm playing, but usually I do workshops on this every Sunday, so they are free. But if you want to support me, I would really appreciate it. You can donate using this button that I'm going to send to the chat. So this is a PayPal button. You click on it, a pop-up window appears where you can enter the amount that you want to donate. Like it can be any amount. Then you click PayPal button. It redirects you to enter your PayPal account. Then you have to log in and send money automatically to my account. This is how it works. I would really appreciate it. Let's continue with our third game today. So what do we see in this position? There is a tension with a pawn structure in the center, so it's actually Najdorf. It was Najdorf originally. And this pawn structure dictates the course of the game. What white should do? Trade on e5, continue with f5. Well, I saw that some suggested bishop e2 move, but bishop e2, what's the purpose? Just to chase the rook away. And what did you achieve with this? I also have to calculate this exchange sacrifice. It also looks promising, and I have to evaluate it. By the way, actually, yesterday my opponent sacrificed exchange. he was under a positional grip, and in order to get his pieces released, he decided to sacrifice exchange. Well, it was possible, but it wasn't the best way to play, and I had advantage. But then later he set a very nice blockade and created a pass pawn, so I had to sacrifice exchange back to save my position. And then I was able to achieve some advantage due to the enemy king's weakness. Okay, a lot of moves to consider. Well, but mainly we are discussing f5 and f takes e5. Well, f5 on the one hand allows you to initiate an attack with g4, but f5 can be always f5 forces you, well, after f5 you have to analyze d5, something like that, or some tactical strikes like bishop c6 and knight e4. It seems to not work in this position. Well, knight b5, I don't see the point. Knight d5 maybe. So let's say f5. How do they play? Bishop c6 or not? What I don't like about bishop c6 is a knight d2 move. Then the rook is trapped, and the e4 is protected enough number of times. So that's why maybe d5 still. How does it work? So, for example, if pawn takes, there is a 5 hanging. This is one thing. The other thing is e4, and then d5 can be captured. So I'm talking about this line. This time I sacrifice and then I do this. But again, I'm not sure. I think white is better after bishop d4. So e takes, so maybe just bishop f5 simply. Because if bishop goes that way to initiate a discovered attack, I think there is knight g4. It's a fork. So bishop takes, the queen has to move. And the black develops some activity, and the d5 pawn is likely to lose if the queen goes away from the d file. So f5 in Najdorf always may lead to d5 as a counter play. Knight d5. Well, this time knight d5, knight e4, so it's likely to be a blunder. Knight b5, in my opinion, makes no threat. Well, you want to capture on d6, I'm fine with it. Then knight e4 will be played. So, for example, knight b5, knight e4, the rook is hanging, so bishop takes, rook takes. Then I'm threatening to take there as well as there. So if you play knight d6, you lose. So queen takes there, rook takes on e3, black is a piece up. So maybe you have to play something like that, who knows. And then just bishop c6, let's say. Not a super good move. Well, white is not losing, but what did you sacrifice a pawn for? Okay, the b3 knight should be activated. It's not an easy task. You can play knight d2 with a tempo, but from d2 where the knight goes. Well, black may activate this knight to c5, but for such a purpose, they have to trade and get rid of the pawn on d6. F takes d5 obligatory means that black captures with the d pawn and c5 becomes more achievable. But immediately you cannot bring the knight to c5. Okay, so here white decides to open files for their pieces. Rook d2. Looks logical. So f5 doesn't work. There is no preparation to keep tension. Let's release this tension and let's activate our pieces instead. So the queen goes to c7 to not get pinned. And queen gr1. So the idea is to play this move, bishop b6, as well as to have c5 for the knight. bishop d8. And now the knight can go to c5 if they want, if white wants. But white plays this move first. Bishop goes to c6, and it's time to defend on c5 with a knight. But if you play such a move, it is b6. What would you suggest? Maybe there is a tactical strike that you can notice here. Okay, so rook takes bishop and then bishop b6. Rook takes bishop, rook takes rook. And if you then play bishop b6, they capture on d1, attacking your queen. So if you take the enemy queen, they take your queen too. It's just an exchange. And you sacrifice your rook for a bishop in the first move. So you'll be down material. I can show you. So this, bishop b6. Looks like you win material, but they have this move attacking your queen. So white has extra exchange. Anything else? Just bishop f2. Well, it seems, well, what for, first of all? But it seems that this is a very slow move. What's the purpose? Bishop e2. Well, then you lose on e4, but then you threaten here. So bishop e2 is interesting. I think they will sacrifice exchange. Then play knight e4 because they are likely to take the second pawn. Yes, but then the pawns are not doubled on c3, c2 and c3. So maybe it works too because the rook is trapped, isn't it? Actually, yeah, the rook is trapped. Yeah, okay, yeah, deserves attention. But I would prefer still this. I would prefer playing without exchange, but with such a pawn. Because in this situation, it seems that the rook is trapped too, but at the same time, the pawns are doubled. Okay, so, well, Graham, rook d8, rook. You want to trade many times. Okay, so there is a suggestion by Graham to trade several times on d8 and then play bishop b6 in order to take there. But you sacrifice exchange and then you win a pawn. You want to trap the rook. That's the purpose. Fine. But queen e8. So now you take. The rook is trapped. How can I play? Rook c3? I'm just checking if there is a better move. No, I don't see anything better. So let me take. Pawn takes. Knight c2. Let it be knight c2. So the knight is not trapped because I have a counterplay with queen a6 then. Let's say queen c1. Queen a6. Bishop d8. If you play bishop d8, then the knight is poisoned because of queen f1. At least I can let him escape there. Why not queen d1 instead? Well, because he escapes to a3. No, it doesn't seem to work so well for white. There is a much better line. What else do you have? Knight d5 is your suggestion here. Knight d5. How does it work? There is a pawn hanging. So what if they take? You take. They take on c2. Why not queen? Okay. Okay, let me show you. It's just bishop c5. Rook e8, and then you play queen f8, queen f1. The rook is trapped. Why these moves were required? Because now, in case of a sacrifice, the pawn on e4 is not hanging. For example, knight e4, bishop e4, bishop e4, and then this, which is a double attack. This? You mean this, but knight takes. Well, even if there is, it's still protected. No, well, taking on c3 is the most promising line, but they played rook e8. Yeah, first rook e8 to save this exchange. Maybe bishop e7 was a move. What do you think? Because if queen f1 now, you can take on c5 with your rook. For example, if so, you can just do this. This looks quite favorable. So rook c3, pawn takes c3, rook c5. You do have rook c5, that's right. But I at least won a pawn. Maybe I can continue somehow. Maybe this, and this. It's still trapped, so you can well, doing this doesn't work because there is a knight hanging on b4, so probably you just take with a rook then. Takes, knight takes, the rook is trapped. Okay, so I still want to do this. I want to win a pawn, but can I try queen? Oh, I can try this because queen e6 means rook d6. Yeah, thanks, Graham. Because queen e6, rook d6, and now they have to sacrifice on e4, and there is not enough compensation. So knight takes, knight takes. Okay, take, take. Something like that. It's not a double attack, but occasionally I can trade queens or I can play rook d7. I think white is winning. Okay, so, well, the pawn on e4 is 3 times attacked, and just capturing on e4. Well, it did happen. Oh, no, it didn't. They sacrificed on c7. So you can take on e4 instead, you mean? Yeah, it is a possibility. Take, 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 take. Then rook d7. So that's the problem. Okay, so rook c5, knight c5, and queen e7. But this is already technically winning position. There is not enough compensation. e4 is protected. So the knight is not well placed. However, looks good actually. But, well, they could activate the bishop like that. And the black's bishops are strong, especially their dark squared one. So queen e2, g6, and I want you to think about the plan for white. What would you do? Because it restricts the white's pieces from movement. So, for example, e3, f2 squares are unavailable for white major pieces at least. Knight c5 will be never played. Well, rook d6 here may lead just to repetition. They will play bishop c7 and bishop b6 back. If you want to play like that, knight d5, I think too early. Because if you decide to play knight d5 here, they can trade and push e4. Yeah, but let's check with a bishop to not make the bishop hanging. And then what? I don't want to play this, because even h5 or e3, so it doesn't look promising. So want to get rid of the knights and then bring the queen to h6. Okay, so let me give you a few tempi and you will bring it. Okay, so let's say king h8, you play queen e3, and let's assume that it's not hanging. So king g8, and you bring... you want rook d6? It was knight d5 line. Okay. Let's say you reached it. What then? So it's unlikely to work. You don't have enough pieces into the attack. Even if you reach, even if you spend several tempi and bring the queen, there is no rook lift. The knight blocks you. So there is no knight that can support on g5. And with only one queen into the attack is unlikely to be successful. In order to successfully attack, you should, well, several factors have to be met. And one of them is material majority on the king side. When you have more pieces than your opponent can bring into the defense. But this time, most of his pieces are in the defense, at least these two. And this is a lot. So at least you should bring the queen and rook and knight to attack the king. Maybe then you would succeed. Because the king's position is not compromised. So g6 was played, but if you had a dark squared bishop, then maybe. But without it, I doubt that this attack is promising. So that's why you have to play positionally instead. You should initiate exchanges, simplifying the position and realizing your extra exchange in the game. So the next is the knight's invasion into the enemy camp with the idea to initiate favorable trades. So rook e8, not sure what for. Probably they wanted to play with the bishop and didn't want to leave the a5 hanging. So knight c1, and knight goes to c3. Everything is defended. h5, rook e1. So defending here, but then rook d6 attacking this knight. Knight d7, rook dd1 back. So black doesn't want to trade pieces. They should be looking for some complications here. That's why they continue with queen h6. What should we do? We protect, but we just retreated back. So what does it allow us to do? So yeah, it does make sense to invade the enemy camp, but let's invade the enemy camp with the queen. Queen d6. So queen f8, queen d6, offering a trade. Even if it's, well, they repeated the position, and finally white played h3, kind of a waiting move and some prophylaxis. Also stops knight g4. Rook e8 and then knight d6. Well, not just to threaten something, but to regroup the white's pieces. There is no discovered attack. I mean, the knight can move to c5, but we just move the queen away. So bishop c7, and finally white prepared all his pieces and opens the position and initiates trades. The bishop is hanging. Well, moving it back means just knight f6, and after knight takes there is a rook hanging behind. That's why here they decided to trade pawn takes, and then knight f6 was played. So what's your opinion regarding this position? How to not lose a pawn on e4? Oh, sorry, on d5. You can just take on e5 immediately and just trade it, right? Well, queen g5 was played with a temper, and after knight d5, knight e5, I think it was better. There is no complications based on this discovered attack. f6 is not a threat, it's queen g6. How would you continue for white in this position? And then what? What is a mate? But they have a queen that they always offer to trade, and with no queens there is no mate. So, well, let's try. So, actually, after 95, they played queen g7, and bishop h5 no longer works. But let's say they spend the tempo on something else. It's actually hard to make a move, because this is even a blunder. Okay, let's say they played... Oops. Yeah, it's hard to make a move. Let's say king h7 maybe. But now bishop h5 looks stronger, because this, and then rook lift works, because if queen goes there, it's queen f7. So queen g7, this, and then a rook lift, for example. So king h7 is a wrong move. Well, let it be, I don't know, rook e8, let's say. No, rook e8, I blunder here. b6, no. Bishop a4, no. Well, it's a Zugzwang, actually. So queen g7 seems like the only move in this position. Now you cannot take. But your task is to trade pieces. By chasing this, you can take on d8. Then, for example, knight f6, you can take there. You can take there. There is no discovered attack. At least no promising discovered attack. There is also a pin. And I even think that you can, in order to simplify, well, first of all, you can take on c6, but in order to simplify, maybe you just play this move. And then this, because after the knight moves, this endgame is completely winning. Knight d6, you trade queens and then promote a pawn. Well, maybe not like that. Maybe bishop b5 first and then you promote a pawn. But if you don't want, just take on c6, it should be winning anyway. And once the knight moves, it's this, or queen d8 directly. f6 was played. So they take our knight, we take their knight. Queen g6, f takes e5, take there, check, to trade more pieces, because if the king moves, it's queen h5 with a check. That's why they have to take. Then queen g7, and this endgame is absolutely winning with no chances. If they don't take our rook, then we play rook d7 and win the game anyway. So, not the kingside attack, but an exchanging strategy, exchanging pieces strategy worked here for white. Once again, look at this position. So f5 looks attractive with a kingside attack, but the problem is that with the knight there, f5 is always met with d5. And this is what white would better avoid. That's why they trade in order to activate their pieces, and then trying to take advantage of it, especially on the fact that the rook on c4 is quite, feels quite uncomfortable. After which white managed to trap it and then realized his extra material. Okay, so for today we are done. What you should remember, that every time when there is a tension or you are about to create a tension in the center with your pawns, you have to decide what is better for you. To maintain it and prepare your pieces, to initiate a trade, I mean doing a release of a tension, in order to achieve a favorable position, maybe some initiative, maybe better pieces coordination just, or you should advance. For example, if you see that enemy pieces are better prepared for opening the position, just advance and you stop a trade, and this means that you stop activation of the enemy pieces. Do you have any questions for today? Okay, thanks a lot. See you next Sunday at the very least. Thanks for coming. Bye bye.